All right, get ready because we are about to flip pretty much everything you thought you knew about human motivation totally upside down. Today in this explainer, we're diving straight into the paradigm-shifting research of Alfie Kohn. We're pulling directly from his landmark book, Punished by Rewards, alongside some of his really fascinating interviews on educational leadership. Look, if you've ever managed a team, taught a class, or even just tried to force yourself to finish a really stubborn task, this is going to completely change how you view the world. So let's kick things off with a pretty provocative question. Are rewards secretly ruining our motivation? I mean, let's be totally honest here. We all absolutely love getting a surprise bonus check at work or that quick rush of getting an A or a gold star in an assignment. It feels awesome, right? But we really need to take a hard look at their true impact. What if, and just hear me out, what if the exact things we're using to drive performance are actually slamming on the brakes? Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the myth of motivation. Then, behaviorism and B.F. Skinner. Third, exactly why rewards actually fail. Fourth, we'll look into the perils of praise. And finally, we'll wrap up with the 3 C's of motivation. Okay, part 1, the myth of motivation. We've got to tackle this deeply ingrained societal belief right out of the gate. We naturally tend to think of punishments and rewards as total opposites. But if you look closely at how they actually work, whether it's a threat, like do this or else, or a bribe, like do this and you'll get that, they are fundamentally the exact same mechanism of manipulation. You're basically doing something to someone instead of working with them. Researchers Ed Deci and Rich Ryan have a brilliant name for this. They call it control through seduction. So rewards, essentially, are just punishment light. Why? Well, because nobody really enjoys having the things they want, money, a pizza party, or just basic approval, used as levers to control what they do. That whole contingency aspect of a reward, it actually makes it feel incredibly punitive over the long haul. Moving right along to part 2, behaviorism and B.F. Skinner. To really wrap our heads around why we rely so heavily on these bribes, we have to rewind a bit and look at the legacy of behaviorism, which was famously championed by B.F. Skinner. We can trace this whole mindset right back to his operant conditioning experiments. That's basically the science of modifying behavior using consequences. Skinner would put rats and pigeons into these little boxes and train them to hit targets or press levers just to get food pellets. The animals learned one simple rule: doing X gets me Y. Now here is the absolute wildest part. That exact same animal training logic completely leaked into our classrooms and our workplaces. Behaviorism is a psychological approach that focuses entirely on outward actions and external reinforcements. It completely ignores what a person is actually thinking or feeling on the inside. We basically started treating humans like pets who just need a doggy biscuit to do a trick. We assumed, hey, if you want a kid to read a book or a salesperson to close a deal, you just dangled the human equivalent of a food pellet in front of them. Crazy, right? Which brings us to part 3, why rewards actually fail. So if that behaviorist approach is flawed, what actually happens when we use grades and money to motivate people? Well, the evidence against it is just overwhelming. First off, rewards are temporary fixes. They just slap a Band-Aid over underlying problems. If a student is acting out or an employee is totally underperforming, just tossing a reward at them completely ignores why they're struggling in the first place. Secondly, they absolutely destroy relationships. When you introduce, say, a limited pool of bonuses or a grading curve, you breed this really toxic competition. People stop collaborating, they start hiding problems from their bosses. It's a mess. Rewards also discourage risk-taking, and honestly, the most dangerous part, they actively erode our natural built-in intrinsic motivation to learn and do good work. Let's actually zoom in on that risk-taking aspect for a second. When we offer rewards, we aren't expanding possibilities, we are literally creating tunnel vision. Because think about it, if your only goal is just to secure that A or grab that quarterly bonus, you're going to take the easiest, safest, most guaranteed route to get that payoff. People promised rewards tend to opt for simpler tasks that ensure a swift success. It totally restricts creative problem solving because nobody wants to risk trying something innovative if it might jeopardize their prize. The work itself just becomes this tedious little hurdle you have to jump over to get the goodies. Alfie Kohn has this quote that just hits so hard. And by the way, this is backed up by over 70 different studies. He says the more you reward someone for doing something, the less interest that person will tend to have in whatever he or she was rewarded to do. Just let that sink in for a second. Even if a child or an employee originally loved doing a task, the second you start paying them or rewarding them to do it, they will eventually lose their natural passion for it. The reward basically sends this subconscious message. Hey, this activity must be something I wouldn't want to do on my own. Otherwise, they wouldn't have to bribe me to do it. And the kicker? Once those rewards stop, the behavior stops entirely. All right, part 4, the perils of praise. Now, right about now, you're probably thinking, okay, sure, money and grades can be tricky, but surely just telling someone good job is totally harmless, right? Well, this might actually be the toughest habit for us to break. We really need to realize that praise is, very often, just a verbal reward. When a teacher says, oh, I love the way Cecilia is sitting so nice and quiet, they aren't actually talking to Cecilia. They're using her to manipulate the rest of the kids in the room. Plus, slathering on praise for super easy tasks actually sends this subtle, kind of insulting message that the person isn't very bright. It turns the classroom or the office into this endless quest for triumph, where everyone is just competing to be the favorite. This is a massive, massive paradigm shift. Look, we all want to be appreciated, for sure. But as Kohn points out, praise is not just different from unconditional support, it's the exact opposite of that. Typical praise actually translates to jump through my hoops, do exactly what I want, and only then will I tell you I'm proud of you. It's incredibly conditional. And what happens is it creates these praise junkies who become totally dependent on external validation. They literally can't evaluate the worth of their own work without someone patting them on the head. What people actually crave and need is unconditional support and encouragement, no matter what their immediate output looks like. And that brings us to our final section, part 5, the 3 C's of motivation. Okay, so if we completely abandon these deeply ingrained reward systems, no more bribes, no more verbal gold stars, how on earth do we actually foster authentic drive? Well, before we can build that genuine motivation, we have to clear the foundation. We've got to remove the behaviorist threats completely. In the workplace, this means paying people fairly and equitably so that they literally forget about money and can just focus on the work itself. And in schools, it means moving away from traditional numerical grades and shifting toward actual meaningful feedback-based assessments. You've got to take the whole anxiety of the carrot and the stick away first. Once that foundation is clear, we hit the first of Kohn's 3 C's of motivation, collaboration. Now, this does not mean pitting teams against each other to win some group bonus, because we already know that completely ruins teamwork. No, collaboration means helping individuals feel like they're part of a safe, caring community. It's about building an environment where people feel totally comfortable asking for help and genuinely working together toward a shared success, rather than constantly trying to outshine their peers. The second C is content. You have to ask yourself a really tough question. Is what I'm asking them to do actually worth doing? Because if you're just handing people trivial, mindless tasks, well, yeah, of course you're going to have to bribe them. The solution there isn't to create a better reward system. The solution is better content. We have to design roles, projects, and curriculums that are genuinely engaging, meaningful, and organically connected to people's real-life interests and passions. And our final C is choice. Look, people do not learn how to make good decisions by blindly following a set of rigid directions. They learn by being granted the autonomy to actually make decisions about what they're doing. When you give people the freedom to manage their own learning and work processes, letting them decide how a task gets done, when it gets done, and who they collaborate with, you aren't just assigning a task anymore. You are empowering a human being. And let me tell you, autonomy fuels intrinsic drive like absolutely nothing else. Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. What kind of classroom or workplace do we really want to have? The next time you find yourself tempted to offer a reward, a bonus, or even just a conditional good job, take a step back. Ask yourself, do you want to manufacture a temporary, shallow culture of compliance? Or do you want to do the much harder but infinitely more rewarding work of building a community that is fueled by genuine intrinsic passion? The choice and the environment you ultimately create is entirely up to you.